Hello, everyone. We're going to be talking today about some of the latest geopolitical developments and what's happening with the U.S. government's policies and how these things are being affected and how they're being analyzed by the most common analysts. Hope that you enjoy this.
At what point in that game do you feel like I have to play by these rules and I'm going to die? I'm going to go to my grave playing by these rules. That's more important. More important for me to die a martyr's death playing by these rules, even if that means the other guy wins, than to stop the game and say, you know what, the rules are not working anymore and we have to stop. We are going to stop playing by these rules. That's what the West is facing with both China and Russia. They have not been playing by the rules, and the West is still, most commentators are still in this idealized point of view where they believe that we still have to play by the rules, even though they're not, and that somehow if we don't play by the rules, then the whole system is going to break down, when the whole system is already broken down. All right, well, here we are. Good to see you again, Carl.
Good to see you too, George. We got a crazy world happening around us, don't we?
We sure do. We sure do.
Yep.
It's been unbelievable.
Looking forward to this conversation, and especially interested in your take of what's been happening on the international scene as your nation has engaged in some pretty interesting maneuvers here in the last couple of weeks, and
Yes.
what all that means in terms of world order, global security. You've got some background in that area, so this is going to be an interesting conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, looking forward to it. So, how do you want to start this?
Well, let's take a look at what happened with your southern neighbor.
All right. Okay, so in the last, since the beginning of the year, the United States went down and a midnight raid to send special forces into Venezuela and captured Nicolas Maduro. There are reports of a number of casualties on the side of the Venezuelans. It seems like as the reports come out, they continue to increase in number each time the reports come out. So you really don't know how many there are. One of the things that I thought was particularly interesting is Maduro's personal bodyguard were all Cubans. They're not Venezuelans. And they were all the people that suffered all the casualties. So that's kind of the biggest thing that's happening. That's with the southern neighbor. Should we move around to some of the other events around the world and then just kind of bring it all in?
Yeah, sure. And I think there's another element that comes into this, George, regarding Venezuela, and that is, of course, the capturing of oil tankers
Yes.
in the Caribbean. Very interesting because usually, big boats are kind of off limits. Um, no nation likes their big boats being played with. And then while we saw the situation in the Caribbean and with Venezuela, some of the oil tankers even trying to run the blockade, in the North Sea, we see the U.S., British special forces, and I'm not sure, I think it was Danish, but I could be wrong, taking hold of, I understand it was an Iranian ship with a Russian flag, with a Russian sub trying to reach the location before the Americans did, which is like, I mean, that's high stakes stuff. This isn't just simply, hey, we're sending a nasty worded letter or a harsh tweet to one another. When you've got forces, a submarine force on one side, and you've got American special forces on another, and they're seizing a boat, seizing a ship. You're now engaging in high stake games, and it makes you kind of wonder, George, what is the larger play that's kind of unfolding before our eyes, especially when you see even like the Iran situation. Well, as we're taping this yesterday, Iran closed its airspace, and I understand America's aircraft flotilla in the South China Sea basically changed course and is coming towards or moving towards the Middle East. That was the rumors I was seeing yesterday. Um,
which is a big concern for American allies in Asia, like the Philippines and Japan, and Taiwan
right,
in particular.
and I was just going to say Taiwan. I'm sure is like scratching their head, going, "Hey, our protection is disappearing into the horizon."
Yes. Mm-hmm.
But that's pretty concerning. And so we've got all these things happening. Venezuela, we've got drama on the high seas. We've got
Mm-hmm.
the Middle East situation, specifically Iran. We've got major geopolitical plays, the constant rattling of the messages around what to do with Greenland and the potential for how the EU, Denmark, and now the EU and NATO allies would work within that. I know my country, Canada, it's been kind of like going, what's going on? Um, and in all this, we've got major resource plays, silver going through the roof. And I
Yeah.
think it's just starting as we're seeing how critical minerals, and of course, in this day and age of artificial intelligence, and everything is high tech, silver is absolutely crucial. You don't have the military, high tech military development or AI the way we think we have it unless you have access to reserves of silver. And that's now a geopolitical play between America, China, and other actors. So boy, we've got a lot of things going on all at once.
Yeah. Yeah, we sure do. They all really come together. And the interesting thing about it that I'm watching, okay. Okay, well first just to address some of the in the big picture, some of the things that you mentioned. The North Sea, there's two things that are very, very concerning about the North Sea to America. One is Svalbard Island, which I think is under Norway's jurisdiction, but it's technically international. And Pippa Malmgren has written about this quite a bit. It's where the geostationary satellite hovers over the Earth and allows this connection, international connection for the internet, comes and goes through that on that island in particular. And I think it was like 2 or 3 years ago, a Russian ship allegedly, well, we know it's actually, the media has to say allegedly. There's all the signs point to is a ship under the instruction of the Russians went over there and cut one of the two cables to that. If they had succeeded in cutting both cables, then that would have caused massive financial disaster over the entire world. So that was a big thing. Of course, in the south, what we're looking at Venezuela. I'm going to talk extensively about that here in this episode. But then all the resources, the silver in particular, the rare earths, China having just recently completed all these exercises around Taiwan, some of the biggest exercises that they have ever had, and um, Russia in the aftermath of America seizing Venezuela. We saw that Russia and China, they didn't do a whole lot, but they did object, and it was right after that that Russia fired these Oreshnovik, hypersonic missiles into Kiev, and then also sent a warning to Germany and said that those are nuclear capable and that they would attack Germany. That Germany, they would consider it a legitimate form of attack to attack Germany with nuclear hypersonic missiles if Germany continued to materially support Ukraine in Russia's war against Ukraine. So all of this is escalatory.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one of the things that I find especially interesting as I go through and look at all this, the first stage when you lose something, you lose someone, is the grief and denial stage. And it feels like the majority of commentators are in the grief and denial stage that we have lost the liberal world order. And we're going to call it the liberal world order. The rules-based international order, the liberal world order, the United Nations run, NATO run, state of international affairs and international trade. If you just kind of lump all of that together in the kind of the liberal world order, that system the system of trade, system of international relations, system of cooperation, basically died when Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022, and the Western powers were unable to use their coercive measures to get Russia to stop the invasion, to pull out of it. And that's really, really important to understand. It already ceased to function. And the reasons why it ceased to function have far more to do with a lot of the economics and economic policies that were undertaken by the West as a result of the peace dividend that happened in 1992 and believing that that was the end of history and there were never going to be any other wars, that they undertook economic policies, focused attention on climate change and all these other things, believing that China and Russia, not even thinking that those two countries would ever cause problems ever again. It was an idealistic view. It was based on a worldview, worldview that we talk about quite a bit. This worldview of believing that now is the time for all the world to come together and put aside our differences and come together as one, and then we can achieve this great, utopian ideal of humanity, and maybe even get to the next great leap in human evolution, so that we can overcome the danger of being made extinct by any number of different factors. So, I wanted to highlight, in particular, one of the commentators that I read, I'm not trying to pick on this particular commentator. I'm more picking on him as a representative of what a lot of people think, rather than trying to pick on him personally. And it was Fareed Zakaria, and he wrote a post in an article in the Washington Post. It's pretty short, and it was summarized on CNN summarized it in one of their texts. Basically, it said Trump's naked power grab undoes America's greatest strength, and you probably see that.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Or Trump. In the Washington Post, it was titled, "Trump is replacing U.S. leadership with fear." So, okay, so the points that he makes in his article basically is he says that he compares the United States with powerful countries in the past. And a lot of his points they're not untrue by any means. I mean, he makes some good points. Like, powerful countries in the past have always had a hard time finding friends. And that's true. They tend to other countries tend to balance power against a dominant power, and we see the examples of this happening in our world today. In the Eastern Europe is against Russia. They've kind of united against Russia as a dominant power. Southeast Asia and other Asian countries have kind of united against China in the rising China. Of course, what he hasn't highlighted here is there have actually been a number of countries that really objected to the power of America and the power of the West. But be that as it is, he says, in general, other countries in the USA have not balanced against America, not because America has not been like other regional hegemons. And I would say that's probably accurate. America has been a rule maker, not a bully, which is true. Our goal was to establish an international rules-based order, something that lined up with our country's objectives of having the nations all work together and cooperate.
And,
the U.S. Yeah.
I was just going to say, and historically, that was America's role post World War II. America played the central role in the development of the Bretton Woods institutions. The United Nations is really, in many respects, an American product. There's a tendency to forget that after World War II, America, in essence, is really the only superpower left standing. Europe is obliterated, it's burnt, Asia is burnt, the world is in turmoil. North America, and the United States in particular, is in a very unique position. It didn't have its industrial base destroyed, didn't have its cities leveled, and it was in a position to come forward and say, hey, these are the rules, and we're going to set this up. We're creating a new international program. Um, in essence, we reject now not reject the League of Nations, but we're shifting. We're shifting the dynamic. And you're right, America. When you think about the rules-based world order, it's been American leadership that has, in essence, carried that forward, along with Britain, and then along with Europe after America comes in, uh, and with the Marshall Plan coming in, basically helping to rebuild Europe. So we've got America at the epicenter of the world order, um, and now it looks like America is at the epicenter of shifting the world order, changing it around completely.
Interesting. That is what it looks like. That is
Yeah.
what it looked like. I would postulate that America may be at the epicenter, but I don't know that America is actually the driver of it.
Mm.
Or perhaps America is the driver of it by mistake because of policy mistakes that we've made for the last 50 years. Uh, and America is also in this condition of needing to focus on America's own long-term viability. And China
Mm-hmm.
has not made a secret about it, especially during their Wolf Warrior days, which they realized they were, you know, they were giving away the store, so to speak. They were when their Wolf Warriors were talking openly of the downfall of America and how China was going to be the next leader of the world. Then they had to back up on that kind of rhetoric when they realized that was only creating more backlash. But I guess in that whole system, the interesting thing about it is the system that was created was designed, the liberal world order, I'll just call it the LWO. The LWO was created with kind of the idea that everybody plays by the same rules. And if everybody plays by the same rules, then everybody wins. We all win together. And that's a great system, right? We all cooperate, there's peace, and that's great. But you have to consider this, and this is where most commentators are not considering it. And just go back in time to when you're a kid and you're playing a board game with a brother or sister. Say you're playing Monopoly or something like that. And there's rules to Monopoly. When they land on your place where the hotel is, they got to pay you rent. And so they land on your place and you're playing the game, and they say, like, you know what? I got plenty of money, but I'm not going to pay you this time. I just don't feel like it. Okay? And, well, no, you have to. Those are the rules. No, I don't, because I'm bigger than you. And if you think you can make me, go ahead and try, because I'm going to win. And, or sneakily pretend to, give them a blank piece of paper that's not actually the money, or something. Doing something that is not following the rules. And fully intent, and in the whole time, or they're either openly saying we're not going to follow the rules, or they're pretending that they are following the rules while they're sneakily, underhandedly cheating completely. And at what point in that game do you feel like I have to play by these rules and I'm going to die? I'm going to go to my grave playing by these rules. That's more important. It's more important for me to die a martyr's death playing by these rules, even if that means the other guy wins, than to stop the game and say, you know what, the rules are not working anymore, and we have to stop. We are going to stop playing by these rules because you haven't been playing by these rules the entire time. And that's what the West is facing with both China and Russia. They have not been playing by the rules, and the West is still, most commentators are still in this idealized point of view where they believe that we still have to play by the rules, even though they're not, and that somehow if we don't play by the rules, then the whole system is going to break down when the whole system is already broken down.
Yeah.
And that's what's going on. And so, like, when we go back, okay, other things that Zakaria talked about. He says that the USA bought consent instead of fear. Well, that's effectively true. And then he says Trump is squandering America's strategic capital. And in both these points, he's got a significant conceptual error in the way he's looking at things. And I would say they're representative of what a lot of people, the conceptual error that many people have, many of these commentators have. And, and he says countries will hedge and move away against America. Well, they already started doing that. Like when Russia invaded Ukraine and America and the West confiscated Russia's foreign reserve assets, what did other countries start doing on the economic side? They started buying gold, and instead of continuing to accumulate American treasury bonds and European central bank treasury bonds. Now, they had already stopped accumulated all those things on net in 2014, but they really accelerated what they're doing because they realized we need to have something that those guys can't take if they decide they don't like what we're doing. So they were already moving away, hedging and moving away against America. And it says America has forgotten its real source of strength. And what I would say to that is America's real source of strength isn't only in the principles. Okay. So this is where I want to get into. Do you have anything else you want to ask before I go on?
No, no. I mean, anything I ask takes us down different rabbit trails. But I mean, I'll tell you right now, what's kind of bubbling up inside is the fact that the Western world, America, definitely holding a significant. There's a significant issue with America too, and that is our debt levels, and the unsustainable nature of our current economic situation. As a Canadian, I'm looking at my country and I'm going, my goodness, we have messed ourselves up completely because of primarily based on certain forms of ideology and the idea that we could have somehow a green revolution when Canada is a resource-rich land. That we should be exporting, and we should be exporting value-added products from our resource sector. And then I'm looking at your country and I'm going, the debt level is just mind-boggling, not just at a national level, at the federal level, but then within domestic households. Like it's really
It's yeah.
It's wild. And then so
staggering.
that's coming into my mind, like in terms of in essence, are we watching a power play to try and maintain not just simply a global economy, but America's anchor role in the global economy in light of these macroeconomic challenges and this incredible debt load? Because you're right, the world is, you look at China, you look at Russia, and there are other nations. I mean, basically the BRICS nations moving deep into gold and far away from treasuries.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not the only ones. And so we've got like a cascading effect at a crucial period.
Yes. That's that. And that I'm actually going to get into the whole debt side of things.
Sorry.
That's all right. That's all right. Very good. But that is a key element, a key element. Okay, so when I talk about, getting back to Farid, and what, like others, he's approaching this whole idea from the perspective that the underlying physical resources that enabled America to lead the rules-based order are infinite and completely under America's control in perpetuity. Now, the reason I say that, because he doesn't mention anything in his article about physical resources. He doesn't even mention it. And he doesn't mention anything about the resources. Those are what's necessary for any hegemonic power to run. They need physical resources and materials. It doesn't matter if it's a benevolent hegemonic power or a despotic hegemonic power. They need physical resources to make it, because that's what is the capability. That's why, if we have some small country that doesn't have an army, we don't go to them and ask them to protect. No country goes to them and asks them to protect them from what's going on. You need the hardware.
Right.
So what it comes down to is the sustainability of America's power. And how is it unsustainable? America's power, greater and greater debt over the last 30, 40 years, less and less manufacturing over that same period of time, greater and greater dependence on China for the operation of the U.S. military, which is highlighted by the Rand Company like 10 years ago in multiple studies, and executives from Lockheed Martin or Raytheon, I think it was Raytheon, came out and said, we cannot manufacture what we need for the U.S. military without Chinese products. And the process of decoupling from China, and China is, of course, America's biggest adversary, but they're supplying all the materials for the hardware for our military. When you put all these together, and then you see that long-term U.S. Treasury bonds, which are a representative, the demand for long-term U.S. Treasury bonds is an indicator of the sustainability of America's debt. See, other countries will not buy long-term American Treasury bonds if they don't believe that America is going to pay them back. The whole reason for buying that is to hold something that can be easily converted to dollars that would gain interest. And during the period of time where that was better than gold, because gold is just a hunk of metal, it didn't gain any interest. But as the debt, they've actually, the devaluation of the dollar at around 8% per year over the last 20, 30 years has gone, people are feeling like those long-term U.S. Treasury bonds, they're not worth as much. Since 2014, I have seen it. I would defer people to Luke Groman. You can find him on Twitter. Has put out a lot of work on this, and has posted charts, basically getting data from the Federal Reserve showing how since 2014, foreign countries have not increased long-term U.S. Treasury holdings on net. You can see it's flatlined. They roll them over. They roll them over because it's, the debt has to mature, and so they roll them over. But they haven't increased since 2014. Foreign central banks foreign central banks stopped buying long-term U.S. Treasuries. And so what that has to do with it, of course, is that besides that is an indicator, taking a position on what you believe the viability of U.S. debt is, what you believe the viability of all U.S. debt, of the American economy is, and that those long-term U.S. Treasury bonds, they finance the U.S. government, they finance the U.S. military, they finance U.S. military industrial purchases. And so this whole system, it worked as long as four things were in place. The four things were: one, other countries were willing to purchase U.S. debt; two, the physical supplies necessary to equip the military were available for purchase; and three, the suppliers of that equipment were willing to take dollars as payment, and then they recycled those profits back into U.S. Treasuries; and four, middle-class America was willing to risk the lives of their sons, and sometimes their daughters, in overseas foreign wars. Those four things basically have kept the LWO in place. Okay? But increasing debt, increasing entitlements. One of the things that Luke Groman highlights is that what he calls the true interest expense on the U.S. government's debt. True interest expense is the actual interest that we have to pay on the debt plus entitlements, which is Social Security and Medicaid, Medicare, and housing assistance, things like that, plus Veterans Affairs. Those things constitute what is called true interest expense. And the reason it's an expense that doesn't have any return. There's nothing about those three areas that will flip around and cause an increase in GDP, which would then increase tax receipts. It is pure expense that doesn't bring anything back. It's going up every month, every quarter. It's going up, and it has, for over a year now, it has exceeded the tax receipts that come into the U.S. Treasury. Just the interest alone. And
Yeah.
just the true interest alone has exceeded the tax receipts. So, and I think that's called Ferguson's law, that any great power that, starts to do that is not going to remain a great power for long. So, and you look at all these things, what has happened? Other countries stopped purchasing long-term U.S. debt since 2014, but the U.S. federal deficit continued. And if you look at what U.S. debt looks like now, it's shifted almost entirely to what's called the front end of the yield curve. That's in finance speak. For non-financial people, for layman's terms, that means it's short term. Like it's 30-day, 60-day, 90-day bonds, maybe up to 1 year. 1 year, you buy a bond and you get that bond back plus interest on whatever duration that it is, whether it's 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, or a year. That's short term. Historically, what the U.S. actually, and for the viability of the U.S. expenditures, it needed to be long term. Because if it's long term, and if it's long term at a low interest rate, it means that the actual interest expense that the U.S. government has to pay doesn't really significantly increase year after year. If it's because it's the same, it's long term. So, and that actually started not under President Trump, it started under Janet Yellen. Now, here's the thing I do want to emphasize. I'm not saying all this to make this a thing about endorsing President Trump. I'm not trying to endorse President Trump and speak badly against the last Democrat president. That's not the point. The point is to recognize a lot of analysts, they're pinning the blame on Trump when the reality is the blame has much deeper causes, which both the Trump administration and the Biden administration have had to deal with.
Thank you for tuning in. Understand that how the levels of debt are affecting things can be a bit challenging, but these things are having an effect. And so I hope you've been able to follow along. And in the next episode, as we continue on, where we get a little bit more into the more practical effects of the excessive debt levels and how it affects the world.